fingers brushing against lips, scars catching the light on bare skin, a girl held in restraint, and the promise of one of the most provocative, sexually charged adaptation in years. Of course, I'm talking about Wuthering Heights, a version already accused of pushing a literary classic too far. But why did this adaptation provoke so much outrage? Because it betrayed the novel, or because it dared to centric erotic desire? Even before Wuthering Heights hit theaters, the film starring Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi had already sparked a wave of controversy. Presented as the new adaptation of Emily Bronte's iconic Gothic novel, director Emerald Fennell's take exploded across social media long before its premiere. Trailers and first images provoked a storm of reactions. Some called the film outright pornographic, while others accused it of betraying the Gothic spirit and reducing a literary classic to a glamorous, stylized aesthetic. Particular attention was drawn to the casting. In the novel, Heathcliff is described as a non-white character with dark features, but the film cast white actor Jacob Elordi in the role. Many viewers pointed out this whitewashing aspect, reducing a complex character and turning him into a safer, more conventional romantic figure. The first promo images only added fuel to the fire. Costumes and visual style often did not fit the historical period, leaning instead towards a modern, more contemporary look. Even before its release, the film had been labeled rage bait, an adaptation with a TikTok-ready aesthetic, the kind of adaptation that, as jokes on social media suggested, would make Emily Bronte roll in her grave. While preparing this video, I spent a long time thinking about what I could add to this discussion. The film had already been widely analyzed long before its premiere, from Jacob Elordi's casting as Heathcliff and their racial issues to professional breakdowns of costumes in terms of historical accuracy. I didn't want to simply repeat what had already been said, especially considering that many English-language creators on YouTube or in writing had already explored these topics in depth. That's why I decided to focus on the element that drew attention from the very first trailers, and which is simply impossible to ignore: the eroticism in Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights. Hi everyone, my name is Alana Shulova and you are watching Femme Fatale's Heels channel, where we talk about women, film and women in film. And in this video I want to analyze how eroticism and sexual desire are portrayed in 2026 Wuthering Heights. If you enjoy deep dives into cinema through the lens of female gaze and power dynamics, please consider subscribing. Only about 25% of you watching are currently subscribed, and I'm really trying to rebuild and grow this space, so it truly makes a difference for me. I want to make it clear right away, this video does not dispute or diminish other critiques of the film. I agree with criticism regarding the casting and with the view that the new Wuthering Heights is an excessive simplification of the classical story. So in this video I simply want to focus on other elements of the film that have not yet been widely explored by other creators. Especially because around Valentine's Day, films with a certain erotic focus often come out. The most obvious example, I think, is 50 Shades of Grey, as well as other films that promise sex and erotic tension, but often fail to convey real desire or erotic complexity. That's why this aspect of Fennell's adaptation is particularly interesting to me. Before moving on to the analysis of how eroticism is depicted in the film, I want to briefly outline the plot of this adaptation. It is extremely simplified. Unlike the original novel, it covers only the first half of the book. At the center of the story are Catherine and Heathcliff, who grew up together at Wuthering Heights. Catherine is the daughter of the estate's owner, while Heathcliff is effectively adopted. The man simply finds him on the street and brings him to live in the house. From early childhood, a close bond develops between Catherine and Heathcliff. They are clearly in love with each other, but when they grew older, they cannot marry because the family has gone bankrupt. and Catherine receives a proposal from a wealthy neighbor, Linton. Catherine accepts the proposal, Heathcliff is hurt by this, and he disappears for 5 years. Catherine marries Linton, and later Heathcliff returns, now with a higher status, he is wealthy, and even buys Wuthering Heights. For a time, Catherine and Heathcliff have a secret romance, but due to a series of tragic misunderstandings, the two are separated again. Catherine dies, and Heathcliff never gets the chance to say goodbye. So, if you have read the novel, you might already notice at this point that the film has very little in common with the source material, apart from names and locations. Personally, I decided to watch this film as a story that is not connected to the novel at all, because in essence, that's exactly what it is. The film opens with a hanging scene, and a named man dangles from a noose, struggling to breathe. The camera focuses on the darkness inside his mouth as he gasps for air, and then on his bodily reaction to the strangulation, that is, an erection. This very first scene already clearly sets the tone of the film. It is a story about death and sex, about the boundaries between desire and violence. After this, we meet the child versions of Catherine and Heathcliff. She is a spirited, impulsive girl. He is an orphan used to keeping to himself. In their childhood scenes, a bond gradually forms, which later carries into their adult lives. One of the final scenes of their childhood is an episode in which Heathcliff takes the blame on himself, directing their father's anger away from Catherine. He is brutally whipped, leaving bloody marks on his back. Later, when left alone, Catherine says she feels unbearable guilt, that she feels responsible and miserable because he suffered on her account. But Heathcliff responds that he regrets nothing. This scene becomes key to understanding their relationship. Love in this version of Wuthering Heights is measured not by tenderness, but by endurance. Their closeness is expressed through pain, through how much they are willing to endure for each other, from physical injury to psychological strain. Immediately after this, the story shifts to the adult Heathcliff. The camera lingers on his back, on the scars that glisten with drops of sweat. This image is both symbolic and vividly physical. The scars are a bodily record of what he has endured, years of humiliation, violence, and suppressed rage. Yet the way the camera frames them turns trauma into an object of the gaze. Heathcliff's body here is not so much a memory of pain as it is an eroticized image. The shine of his skin, the close-up, the attention to texture, all of this makes suffering part of the film's sexual aesthetic. And by now it becomes clear. This story speaks of love through the body and of desire through wounds. I think much of the sexual tension between Heathcliff and Catherine works because of the actors themselves. Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi really share that on-screen chemistry that few couples manage in erotic cinema. Personally, though, I find it difficult to see them as truly young teenagers at the start of the film. Their faces and general presence clearly show adult actors, so the naive, slightly childish behavior carried over from the novel feels somewhat unnatural. However, in the scenes where the characters are older, their dynamic works more convincingly. Their tension, physicality, and conflict feels natural, and this is when the story begins to feel more realistic. The film also uses well-known quotes from the novel, such as, "Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same." These words are deep and powerful on their own, coming from the literary source, but in the film I think they are presented more as a direct statement of feelings than a part of the complex inner drama. They are delivered almost as a declaration. The characters love each other, and that's it, without additional visual or symbolic reinforcement. Still, I also think that if you view the Wuthering Heights primarily as an erotic story about passion and bodily desire, these quotes don't feel entirely out of place. Because of the simplified context, they sound more superficial than in the novel. Sure, you can talk about souls, but on screen it's mostly the bodies that dominate. This dynamic of desire intertwined with punishment becomes the central motive of the film. As in the novel, Heathcliff overhears Catherine saying that marrying him would degrade her, that it would be a social fall. But he does not hear the second part where she confesses that she loves him deeply, that he is more herself than she is. In this adaptation, this misunderstanding is not just an emotional wound. It also carries a certain eroticized sense of injury. Rejection becomes something that must be repaid. Desire turns into revenge. According to the film's logic, if love has always been measured through endurance, then humiliation must also be endured and then transformed. And this smoothly leads into the next topic I want to explore: sadomasochism and BDSM in the new Wuthering Heights. Also, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like, leave a comment and subscribe. YouTube likes very much when people engage with content while watching it. It will really help us with the views and promoting our videos. Also, if you want to support our work, you can join to our Patreon. You can get in early access to videos there, or with no YouTube restrictions or YouTube censorship. We will be very grateful for any amount of support. It is an act of extreme masochism to try and make a film of something that means this much to you. There's an enormous amount of sadomasochism in this book. There's a reason people were deeply shocked by it, recalled Fennell in her interviews. When Heathcliff leaves Wuthering Heights, Catherine waits for him for a year, and the film makes it clear this waiting is also a form of slow punishment. The period reaches its peak in a scene where Catherine tightens her corset, preparing for her wedding with Edgar Linton. In social media, many people pointed out a technical aspect. The corset is fastened directly onto bare skin, a major historical inaccuracy from a costume perspective. But for me, it serves more as another sign that the film deliberately eroticized this everyday ritual, turning the act of dressing into a subtle metaphorical BDSM signal. The moment is intensified when Catherine asks for the corset to be tightened even more, a form of self-punishment, a way to feel something physically. The body being squeezed reflects the suppression of her desire, a suffocating mix of longing and guilt. Another scene with BDSM elements appears early in the film, when Catherine accidentally stumbles upon a secret meeting between the stableman and the maid. They are hidden in the stable, surrounded by leather bits and horse straps, things that normally used to control horses, here repurposed as tools of erotic play. This scene transforms a mundane workspace into a place filled with longing and desire. Tools originally meant for domination and restraint become symbols of control, submission, and eroticization. In this scene, Heathcliff interrupts Catherine's intrusion. He covers her eyes and presses a hand to her mouth, both shielding her from what she is not ready to see and asserting control over her perception. This gesture works on multiple levels. On one hand, it is protective. Heathcliff does not want her to be traumatized by witnessing the act. On the other, it is intimate, invasive, and erotic. His body presses against hers, their breaths close, a physical assertion of both dominance and care at the same time. BDSM in this scene functions on many levels. Visually, the leather straps frame the sexual act as one of domination. Physically, Heathcliff's hand over Catherine's mouth and eyes turns silence into a space of bodily intimacy and erotic tension. Psychologically, Catherine faces the intertwining of desire, secrecy, and the social transgression, feeling both curiosity and shame. This scene embodies the film's broader style of eroticized control. Desire is inseparable from restraint, pleasure from tension, and the boundary between protection and possession is always blurred. Through such scenes, the film constantly blurs the line between the everyday and eroticized suffering. The mundane, the habitual, even the ceremonial is charged with sexual tension and reminds the characters of what they have lost, at the same time what they cannot escape. Here, desire and punishment are inseparable, and the body becomes both vessel and instrument of this duality. At the same time, this aspect of sadism and masochism is reflected in the characters themselves. In interviews, the director described Catherine as a cunning sadist who likes to pinch and test limits. Similar traits appear in Heathcliff, especially from the moment of his return. 5 years pass, and by this time Catherine has almost lost hope that he will come back. His return is presented almost as the intrusion of repressed desire. He is wealthier, more violent, composed, but the scars remain, both visible and hidden. As in the book, he marries Isabella, seeking to take revenge on Catherine. But in the film, this act is again translated into a sexual plane. When Heathcliff Heathcliff brings Isabella to Wuthering Heights, he makes an agreement with her. She will write letters describing his cruelty, letters meant to shock and scare, and in return he will submit to her. Interestingly, the film barely shows this agreement directly. It is mostly implied, but the meaning is clear. The roles have reversed. Isabella, usually portrayed as a passive victim in the novel, here demonstrates agency, manipulating the narrative and orchestrating Heathcliff's submission. Desire and domination are not fixed. They circulate between the characters. And while Isabella wears chain around her neck, which shocked many viewers from the trailers, she clearly feels perfectly fine in this agreement. As the saying goes, don't save her, she's exactly where she wants to be. In my view, this BDSM aspect is more psychological here. The submission between the characters is mutual and negotiated. They get from each other what they want. Heathcliff the letters, Isabella the fulfillment of her fantasies. And while this Wuthering Heights can be criticized for many things, in terms of eroticism, I think it deserves praise. And this is largely connected to the female gaze present in the film. Many people joke that this version of Wuthering Heights could have been avoided if Emerald Fennell had access to fanfiction on the topic in her youth. And I completely agree that the film strips away, or at least simplifies to the extreme, almost all of the psychological complexity of Catherine's and Heathcliff's relationships in the novel. In the book, their connection is rarely described as simply as love. More often, it is an obsession that destroys their own lives and echoes into the lives of future generations. In this adaptation, sexual desire and narrative of great love story take central stage. They become the driving force of the narrative. But in this part of the video, I want to focus specifically on how the film portrays sexual desire and intimacy. The key point for me is that these scenes align with the concept of the female gaze. Even from the trailers, it was noticeable that the film pays close attention to hands and mouths. And no jokes here, this is actually a very interesting way to show female desire on screen. In a themed video, authors from the YouTube channel Take discussed a similar logic of erotic focus in the first season of Bridgerton, explaining why it resonated so strongly with the female audience. They noted that the show often emphasized the lips and hands of the male love interest. These parts of the body, in their view, become particularly erotic because they are most likely to provide sexual pleasure to a woman. It is a subtle form of erotic attention. The gaze is directed at the elements of touch and intimacy rather than objectifying the male body as a whole. In my opinion, this same gaze is central in this version of Wuthering Heights. There are numerous scenes where characters put fingers in each other's mouths, trace lips, or the camera lingers on backs, shoulders, and other body parts. At the same time, the film never relies on full nudity or shots of completely naked bodies. I would even say that the film has no fully explicit sex scenes, rather it focuses on parts of it. Despite this, the erotic tension is present, and perhaps even stronger, because it is conveyed through suggestion, tactility, and anticipation rather than explicit display. The eroticism is also built around anticipation and forbidden desire. Before Heathcliff disappears, the characters have no intimate connection, and when he returns, Catherine is already married. This tension, the impossibility of being together, social and emotional barriers, becomes the engine of desire. Every look, every touch, every moment of closeness is charged precisely because it exists within the forbidden. Desire is heightened by the stakes, the awareness that acting on it would violate moral, social, and personal boundaries. This craving connects both restraint and pleasure, intersecting with the theme of sadomasochism I mentioned earlier. In the novel, there are no sexual scenes between Catherine and Heathcliff, not even hints. The tension is entirely psychological, built through dialogue, obsession, and the destructive power of the characters' emotions. In the film, a significant portion of screen time after Heathcliff's return is dedicated to their secret meetings across different locations and at all hours. This choice clearly comes from director. Fennell emphasized the physical reality of the character's desire, rather than leaving it at a symbolic level as in the novel. And this radical shift makes eroticism a driving force of the plot. Desire becomes not just a psychological subtext, but a visible and recurring motive. By making the sexual connection explicit while still avoiding full nudity, reality. The film transforms forbidden desire into a tangible, almost cinematic language. The viewer becomes a witness to desire in real time. The thrill of breaking rules, the anticipation of touch, the interplay of domination, submission, and mutual craving. The female gaze in this adaptation also appears through the theme of consent. In interactions between Catherine and Heathcliff, there are moments when Catherine can pull away or say no, and Heathcliff does not always immediately hear or respect her boundaries. But in my view, this fits the nature of their toxic relationship. They often do not clearly understand where one ends and the other begins. Desire, tension, and intimacy are intertwined with a blurred sense of territory, where boundaries are constantly tested. Importantly, the film does not depict sexual violence, thank goodness, even in the moments that could read as violent. For example, in Heathcliff's marriage to Isabel. When he proposes, he repeatedly asks for her consent and warns her that he might act in extreme, even frightening ways. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the dynamic has shifted. Isabel is no longer just a passive party controlled by Heathcliff. She occupies a dominant, assertive position herself. In my opinion, the film does not explore consent as deeply as it could, but at least it is acknowledged through the story. This is why the film manages to maintain erotic tension while aligning with a female perspective, emphasizing mutuality, negotiation, and the complex interplay of power and pleasure. In the end, I can say that I understand and even share much of the criticism directed at this version of Wuthering Heights. In my view, at the level of the story, it is a very simple tale of unhappy love. And if it weren't for the well-known actors in the leading roles, the beautiful visuals, and the scandalous erotic aspect, the film as a creative work, creative statement, would be entirely unremarkable. However, because this review has focused specifically on eroticism and how the film handles it, I think this is one of the few aspects of which Wuthering Heights truly deserve praise. Yes, it was promoted as kind of adaptation of the novel, and the adaptation aspect is very superficial, but the film was also presented as a rich erotic story, and in that, in my opinion, it succeeds. In this adaptation, desire is not just in the air, it is heavy, sweaty, bruised. It shows in scars, in breath, in closeness, in punishment. Love here is not gentle, it is endured, and the tension between Heathcliff and Catherine exists precisely in this unstable space, where longing and destruction become inseparable. So even with all of its flaws, the film managed to create intense physical and emotional tension, exploring desire, power, and prohibition through a lens of the female gaze. In my view, this makes Wuthering Heights an interesting example of how modern cinema can experiment with eroticism and psychological aspects, even if the story itself remains quite simple. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please give it a like, write a comment, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts on Wuthering Heights, whether you like it or not. What do you think about erotic aspect of the film? If you want to support our channel, feel free to join on Patreon. A special shout out to our patrons Scene Frog and Mellow Scream. Thank you for supporting the channel and helping these videos exist. And of course, thank you to all my patrons for believing in this project and making this independent film analysis possible. I really appreciate your support and feeling truly grateful for it. I'm also working on developing the Patreon and making some exclusive videos for you. So again, thank you for your patience. And again, thank you for watching and see you in the next videos. Bye bye.